G'day, I'm Adam Collings. Welcome to Stories. Today I have the privilege of speaking with author P.A Baines. Paul is the author of the Alpha series, which are hard science fiction written from a Christian worldview. He has also contributed short stories to Aquasynthesis and The Cross and the Cosmos. Well, hi Paul, welcome, and thanks for being on the show. It's great to have you.
Hi Adam, and thanks for inviting me.
Could you start by giving us a bit of an overview of the Alpha series in your own words?
The Alpha series was born from basically a series of discussions I had with some non-believing people, some atheists, who suggested that belief in God was irrational. From this came the thought, or made me wonder, what would happen if a purely rational being, such as a computer program or an artificial intelligence, were presented with the Gospels, presented with the Bible, and combined with the sum of scientific knowledge to date. Would that being come to a belief in God? Would it be capable of faith? And this was really the seed for the story. This was what got the idea going. I then had to put them into a position or into a scenario where the computer could perhaps be in a discussion with a man, with a person, and this would plot the growth of the machine. This would describe the machine's growth into faith. The perfect scenario for that, for me, would be a long-distance space journey. And the most logical journey for me would be to the nearest star system. That would be long enough for very deep discussion and growth, but not so far that it was it would make this story unbelievable. So what I did was I had an idea of a man sitting in a room waiting, being prepared for a space flight, and all of the emotions involved, the feelings involved with being alone on a spaceship going off to some unknown destination. The story really charts Brett's inner and outer journey. He is the man who volunteers to go on this dangerous experiment, this experimental flight to Alpha Centauri. He's lost everything. He has lost his family and his faith and even his will to live to some extent. So for him, it's not a big leap to volunteer for something like this. He just wants to get away from his past as quickly as possible, as far as possible, and also away from God, because he kind of blames God for his problems and for all the bad things that have happened. So the story of Alpha is really about journeys, and this is where the title came from, because it's a journey in three directions. It's a journey to Alpha Centauri, it's a journey towards Jesus, which is the beginning, and it's also a journey towards the beginning of his faith, with the word Alpha meaning beginning. So it's a journey towards beginnings, a journey towards a rediscovery of his faith. And he does this by his discussions with Jay. Jay is a child. It's an artificial intelligence capable of learning, and as such is sort of like a child who has an awful lot of knowledge about everything, all the facts, but has no knowledge about life. And my intention with writing Jay the way I did was to make him like a child. He's this innocent being who is put in a small confined space with a bitter man, and through their interactions they together come to faith in God and rediscover the meaning of life.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. Now, the first book in the series, Alpha Redemption, had quite a unique structure to it. I thought it was very cleverly done. It certainly made a lot of sense in the context of the plot. Did you always intend to structure the book the way you did?
The structure for Alpha Redemption came about through... it was because of the starting point. He's starting out on this journey. He's at the lowest point of his life. He's at his most bitter. Brett is an angry, bitter person, not a nice person. The structure came about from the fact that he was traveling from this low point towards some destination, towards Alpha Centauri and his faith. But I needed to also describe the backstory. I wanted to show how he got there, how he arrived at this low point. At one point he did believe in God, he did have faith, but he lost this through circumstances. So what I wanted to show was his backstory traveling in the opposite direction. So he's at the center point of his life. He's traveling to Alpha Centauri forward, but he's also traveling to his childhood backwards. So what I did was I used a structure where with each journey, each portion of the journey towards Alpha Centauri, we also see the equivalent in the opposite direction. We see his gradual return to faith as a child, while at the same time showing his gradual return to faith as an adult. So it's almost like I folded the timeline in half and had them both stories being told in the same direction, really.
Yeah, so as you say, there's two distinct parts to the book. There's the sci-fi story of Brett and Jay embarking on the first interstellar journey, and then there's the very personal story of Brett's life. I found these tied together really well on a common theme. Was it always your intention that they belong together, or did you originally envisage these as separate stories?
The two parts of the book are designed to work in parallel. They are intertwined. They are like hand in glove. You need to read them both in the order in which they are written, because they tell his story and they will show you why he is the way he is, why he is the bitter person he is. He started out as an innocent child with an innocent faith and an innocent belief in God. And through the trials of life, through circumstances, he ends up completely as far away from God as you can be. He's angry and bitter and has no faith. And so, because the stories are describing his journey towards God, one forward and one backwards, you do need to read them in parallel to understand him. And also there are little things like the fact that he is kind of English. He has Englishisms, and the reason for this is because he was born in England. He spent his youth in England, and he moved to America later on in his school career. So this becomes clear later on in the story, but you need to stick with it. You need to read them both in order to understand why he is the way he is and why he needs to go on the journey to Alpha Centauri.
Now, the end of Alpha Redemption was pretty jaw-dropping. It brought the story to completion, but it left me really hungry for a sequel. Did you ever consider just leaving us hanging there?
The original ending for Alpha Redemption was very different from what it is now. It all took place in the same chapter, but the original ending finished the book. It was the end of the story in my mind originally. And I had no idea of a sequel. That didn't even enter my mind. But Grace, the publisher, she suggested that it would be a good idea to have the story, to leave the possibility for a sequel. And I'm glad I did that way now, because I think a sequel would be interesting, or is interesting. I think the story has a lot further to go. At the moment I have 3 stories planned, in total 3 books, although I'm looking possibly at 4, maybe even 5. I think it's a kind of story that can run and run, because it takes place in, first of all, on a journey to Alpha Centauri. Then secondly, the second story takes place on Mars in a colony. And the third story actually takes place on Alpha Centauri, or will take place on Alpha Centauri itself, on the planet, in the star system of Alpha Centauri. The fourth one I'm thinking about returning to Earth, but I'm going to see how the third story goes.
In the second book, Alpha Revelation, you bring us to a colonized Mars, and I really liked the way you built this world. The management of energy was really important, and it affected the entire culture, even down to changing the moral conscience of the people. Tell us a bit about how you established the Martian setting.
Alpha Revelation takes place on Mars. The idea was that after Brett left Earth on his journey to Alpha Centauri, things went wrong on Earth. He's gone for an awfully long time in the end. We don't say how long, but he has gone for a long time. And things have gone wrong on Earth. Nuclear bombs were used, nuclear weapons were used. This isn't really stated initially, but there's too much radiation on Earth, so the people used the technology that was used to get to Alpha Centauri to evacuate a number of people and set up a colony on Mars. So when Brett returns from Alpha Centauri. He's supposed to be going to Earth, but on the way, he's picked up by the Martians, the Martian colony. They pick him up and bring him in.
Yeah. So, what kind of research did you do for these books?
I did a lot of research for both the first and the second book. For the first book, I went into a lot of research about the speed of light, the effects of traveling at the speed of light. For the second book, I went into a lot of research about what it would be like to live on Mars. I wanted to know what it would be like to actually wake up there, to get out of bed in the morning, and you're on a planet which has half of our gravity, and the environment is very hostile to humans. So the colony had to be somewhere secure underground with just windows to open up onto the outside world. They use heavy doors to protect themselves. And the reason I did this was not so much to include a lot of technical details in the book, but to tell the story in a realistic environment. I wanted it to feel as if the reader knows what it would be like to now wake up on Mars one day. It was the same kind of research I did for the first book, where I wanted to portray realistically what it would be like to have a long journey on a spaceship.
So, you mentioned a third book in the Alpha series, and maybe some others after that. What else can you tell us about book 3?
The third story in the Alpha series is still inside my head. I haven't written it yet. I haven't started yet, although I have a very good idea of the premise. I have a good idea of what I want to happen there, but it's not quite ready yet, so I hope to be writing it down soon when I have more time. The third story will take place on the planet at Alpha Centauri. There you will find out why the colony's there, what happened to the colony, why they left the messages they did for anybody coming or visiting or sending probes. You'll find out where the villain in the second story comes from, and why he is the way he is, and why he went to Mars. So all of the questions that I left hanging open in the first two stories will be covered or touched upon again in the third story. And I like the third story's idea. I think it will be entertaining and quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. There's plenty of questions that you've raised that I'm really eager for answers to, so looking forward to that. What other books have you got in the works?
At the moment, I have 2 books that are finished and are with publishers. I have Hansard, which is with Written World Communication. I'm hoping to see that released soon. It's been delayed quite a bit, but I'm hoping it will be out soon. That one I had a lot of fun writing. It's a comedy, or a dark comedy. It's written from a Christian worldview, but it's not overtly Christian. The only really Christian part is at the very ending, and right in the last chapters. The story of Hansard is about, well, Hansard herself is a genetically modified assassin who is woken up after 6 million years and is being used by the world's richest, or the universe's richest man, to find a book which is supposed to contain the meaning of life, called the Parchment. Along the way, she picks up a number of followers, people who are also trying to find the book for various reasons, and this group of people gets into various mishaps and misadventures on their way to finding the Parchment. At the same time, there is a huge scientific experiment on the go, in which they plan to build the biggest wide array telescope ever built. Here you have telescopes planted all around the galaxy. The idea being that when they point them all in the same direction, they will hopefully be able to see the end of the universe and beyond. They do see beyond the end of the universe, and what they see gives them a surprise. But I won't spoil the story for you.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I have another piece of work with Written World Communication at the moment that is an anthology of short stories as magic realism and fantasy. There's nothing overtly Christian about any of them. They were written purely for the enjoyment of storytelling. They're all on a theme, so they belong together. I was planning originally to submit individual stories, but I think they belong together in one anthology, because they do follow a theme, and it would be a shame to split them up. I've also just finished the first draft of a dystopian end-of-the-world thriller that I am sending out at the moment. It isn't a Christian book, so I'm sending it to secular agencies at the moment, and I hope to get somebody's interest. It's a very simple premise, very, very straightforward. And I think it's quite an interesting story.
Yeah, that's great. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for those when their time comes. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Paul. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show. I loved the Alpha series, and I think it deserves a lot more attention. And I wish you all the best with your future writing.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for supporting me. It's been great fun. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching. You can connect with Paul at pabaines.com, and you can connect with me on the About page of my blog at collingzone.wordpress.com. Catch you next time.